I hope the weather inside is okay. Just a couple of housekeeping rules that I would like to flag as I begin. I said my name and I'm joining from the University of Nairobi here in Kenya. The session is going to be recorded, so I hope you are all okay with the recording. In terms of naming, please, if you can, just rename your details the way they appear. Have the organization first, and then followed by your name, so that it will be easier for us to run through the conversation, and it will also be easier for us to identify who is who in the room. For the interpreters, if I'm speaking too fast, just let me know. And also for the presenters and the ones who are going to ask questions, if anyone is speaking too fast, just let them know, interpreters, and also please try and speak slowly. Kindly switch off your video and also mute yourself. Once the facilitator gives you an opportunity, then you will come on board and they will unmute you. Feel free to use the chat function. It's right after the second little guy just at the bottom of your screen, which is labeled chat. You can use it to introduce yourself so that we keep also a record of who is who joined us. There'll be an opportunity in the second half of this session. It's a two-part process. So in the second session, you'll have a chance to ask as many questions as you may have. Now, some of you, I see a lot of older names, a lot of old faces, and it's also good to see quite a number of new faces have come on board. Many of us have been were with us when we were doing the collaboration, and also when we were doing the presentations from the workshop series. We had a number of workshop series, and I'm so happy to see old faces, and I'm also happy to see the new faces that have joined us. I've just seen a very old friend who I've not seen in many years, George Okotobo, who I met many years ago. So it's actually good to see some of the old faces that we met many years ago. Now, the events today are as a result of collaboration of many individuals who've come to sort of pull this whole process together. We had judges coming on board, we had different researchers, we had policy makers, we had people who were working in the field. And so it was a very great conversation that we had, but on matters relating to climate change, matters of displacement, and matters relating to research. How can we enhance the research that is currently out there? So we had, I can say, for me, it was a lot of interesting information that we came through. So we're going to have a two-part session. So this first part, we're going to launch the research agenda for advancing law and policy responses to displacement and migration in the context of disasters and climate change, i.e. what we have been doing the last couple of months. And then in the second part, we will then launch the research network, the Climate Mobility Africa Research Network. So remember, as we were talking through, for those ones who are with us, we talked through different aspects that we looked at in the first session. So, and we said that this has to culminate into something that is solid. So for the second part, I will hand over to Dr. Nyandiko Nicodemus, who is joining us, joining this call from another part of Kenya, very far away, but I'm sure he'll be with us today. So this is what the agenda session, the session for this agenda will be. And there you go. So we have done, I've already done the welcome. I hope I've welcomed everybody. I've also done the housekeeping. And so then we will have a panel discussion. Again, we have experts who will come and share with us a few insights on the issues that we have been discussing in the last couple of months. And then after that, we will have a few comments from a number of partners who are joining the call today. And perhaps there are others out there who will also join the call at a later stage. So just a bit of background on where this research agenda all started, particularly for the new colleagues who are joining us. Now, this started as a conversation between myself and a few colleagues who are here with us today, Tamara, and a few colleagues from South Africa. We started this conversation, and it was a possibility of doing some research together on questions of climate change, questions of disaster, and questions of human mobility. Yes, Romola was our third, can I say, member of the tag team. And the idea was to try and get a workshop, a small workshop, where we could discuss these potential ideas and see whether we could do joint topics and research questions together. And the idea was also to come up with, to put
Edwin, I think you're muted. Sorry, I can't hear you.
I think I punched that. Okay, so let me just reverse on the idea where the conversation started. Started off with an email conversation myself, Tamara, and Romola in South Africa on the possibility of conducting joint research, bringing researchers together, working on climate change and working also in the area of refugees, internally displaced persons, and IDPs, and also refugees, IDPs, different persons who have been displaced as a result of climate change. And we never knew that we would culminate here into setting up this research network. So as fate would have it, we set up everything. We got a bit of funding from partners, PDD, IOM, UNHCR, and IGAD. They came together. And we had agreed initially that we were going to have this session in Cape Town. But COVID hit, and so we had to rethink where else are we going to go? What are we going to do? Are we going to drop the idea, or what are we going to do? So we decided that rather than drop the idea, why don't we have it virtually? And that is what came about in the last series of meetings that we had online. And it was extremely interesting for us that we managed to get even more players into the room than we ever anticipated. So this is sort of pulling everything together by bringing in everyone who was interested in this process, and also coming up to new players. So in terms of the virtual series, for those who are just joining us, we had around about 200 and just over 250 registered participants. We did over 20 hours of workshops. We had 40 experts, government official, academia, judiciary, policymakers, and the discussions were more or less on what are the opportunities, what are the gaps, and how can we participate in the moving forward. And I can tell you that we logged in so many hours just to try and make sure that everything ran according to plan. And so now we had about, we set out knowledge gaps or 8 fields of laws, 15 specific recommendations that were made on practical aspects of what can be done. And so today we have around about, we have 4 very distinguished, distinguished speakers who are going to speak to us on, again, carrying the theme of research in this area of climate change and development displacement forward. And to hear more of this, I want to bring on board my colleague. Tamara is joining us all the way from but down at the bottom of South Australia. And Tamara is going to give us a little bit on the way to discuss some of the law and policy frameworks that are set out in the research agenda. Tamara, I'm handing over the mic to you. Please take over. Thank you, Tamara.
Edwin, thank you so very much. And it's really great to be back here with, as Edwin said, so many familiar names and faces from the virtual workshop series, as well as many new names and faces. We're really pleased to have you with us. My name is Dr. Tamara Wood. I had the great pleasure to coordinate the virtual workshop series, and today I have the even greater pleasure to lead this panel discussion with 4 very distinguished speakers, in which we're going to explore some of the themes and issues that are discussed in the research agenda, as well as highlight some of the research recommendations or proposals that are set out in that research agenda. To join me for this discussion, I'm very pleased to welcome our 4 speakers: George Okoth-Obo, who is the head of the Secretariat for the UN Secretary-General's High-Level Panel on Internal Displacement. We have Kai Gakkuoth, the Technical Coordinator for Disaster Risk Reduction at the Directorate of Rural Economy and Agriculture at the African Union Commission. Mr. Patrick Ebba, the Deputy Director of the Division of International Protection at the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, UNHCR. And Manuel Marquez Pereira, Head of Migration, Environment and Climate Change Division at the International Organization for Migration, IOM. So thank you very much to all of our speakers for joining us. In this discussion, we're going to look in a bit more detail at some of the law and policy frameworks that can be used to respond to displacement and migration in the context of disasters and climate change in Africa. The research agenda in our discussion today focuses on 8 particular fields of law and policy. These are climate change, disaster risk reduction, migration and free movement of persons agreements, transhumance laws and policies, refugee protection, human rights, protection for internally displaced persons, and planned relocation. These 8 fields of law and policy are not even the only fields that we might look to for responses to climate-related human mobility. They're part of what is sometimes referred to as a toolbox of responses to this issue. Now, what do we mean by a toolbox? What we mean is that the phenomenon of climate change-related human mobility is very diverse and requires diverse responses. There's no single international or regional framework for addressing the predicament and the needs of people who move in the context of disasters and climate change. And of course, we know that people are moving already. In 2020, more than 30 million new displacements occurred in the context of disasters. Many more people move in anticipation of disaster-related risks, or as a result of slow onset processes, including slow onset disasters, environmental degradation, and other impacts of climate change. Some of those people will move for a short time, some will be displaced permanently. Some will move internally within their own countries, and some will move further afield. Because of the very diverse characteristics of human mobility in the context of disasters and climate change, we need a very diverse range of tools to respond. And broadly speaking, we want those tools to do a number of things. Firstly, we would like those tools to help people stay in their homes as long as they possibly can, where that is desired. Secondly, where people decide to move or where they are compelled to, we need to ensure that they're able to do so safely and with dignity. Thirdly, for all those who move and all those who are impacted by that movement, we want to ensure the protection of fundamental human rights. Finally, we want to ensure that this is not just a short-term question, but rather that people impacted by displacement, migration in the context of disasters and climate change can access lasting, sustainable solutions. So it's not difficult, to see why we need a range of different tools to address displacement and migration in the context of disasters and climate change. In our discussion now, we're going to focus on just a few of those tools, and we're going to focus particularly on tools that apply within Africa at the continental, regional, sub-regional, and national levels. So perhaps we'll begin with refugee protection frameworks, and in particular, regional refugee law. It has sometimes been thought that refugee law might be the response, or perhaps could be the response to climate change related movement. But we know, of course, that under refugee law, there's no such thing as a climate refugee. Perhaps I can invite my colleague Patrick Ebba to join us to share a bit more about the role of refugee law in addressing this topic. In particular, what does refugee law have to do with protecting people who are displaced in the context of disasters and climate change in Africa? And in particular, what role does the 1969 OAU Convention governing the specific aspects of refugee problems in Africa play in this regard? Patrick, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Tamara, for inviting UNHCR to this conversation. I want to start by thanking you, but also thanking all the partners who are involved in this worthwhile initiative to advance law and policy responses to displacement and migration in the context of disaster and climate change in Africa. The urgency of climate change and its consequential interrelations with conflict and displacements are actually upon us. From Madagascar to South Sudan to the Sahel, millions of Africans are being displaced within and across borders because of disaster and climate change. The 1969 OAU Convention governing the specific aspects of refugee problems in Africa is as ever pertinent to the challenges raised by climate change and disaster. This is thanks to the wider refugee definition that is provided under Article 1, Paragraph 2 of the OAU Convention, in particular, its reference to events seriously disturbing public order. Scholarly analysis, as well as political comments and pronouncements on the OAU Convention, have all celebrated this wider refugee definition as being key, novel, and forward-looking feature of the convention. And so much of the analysis that I will be providing here, we take anchorage in the provision of the 1969 OAU Convention, particularly its definition of refugees. But I would like to do so pursuant to UNHCR's role in implementation of the refugee instruments under our normative and legal pillar. And I will do so by referring to a particular tool and a particular legal guidance, which was issued in 2020, which is the legal consideration regarding claims for international protection made in the context of adverse effect of climate change and disaster. This guidance sets out the key elements regarding the application of the 1951 Convention in the context of refugees. Of course, the guidance makes it very clear that the notion of climate refugees, as you outlined, Tamara, doesn't exist. However, in the guidance, we actually outline the fact that the OAU Convention has very specific language that could make room for the protection of people displaced because of disaster or because of climate change. And this definition and this aspect of the OAU Convention that allows for that is indeed the reference to events seriously disturbing public order. Similarly, in relation to the 1951 Convention, the guidance recalls that people displaced across border in the context of climate change and disaster may have a well-founded fear of persecution, which compels them to seek refuge abroad, particularly where climate change acts as a threat multiplier affecting people's enjoyment of human rights and where the state is unable or unwilling to provide protection. And so very clearly, you can see the difference between the applicability of the 1951 Convention, which involves other elements, as opposed, if you like, to the applicability of the 1969 Convention. And I would like to refer to some of the very early scholarly analysis of the 1969 Convention, in particular, the work that was done by Gino Naldi, who actually in its analysis of the convention was very clear that, and I would like to quote, environmental catastrophes such as drought and famine, which had given rise to flood en masse and displaced whole population, can be considered to be included in the definition of the 1969 Convention. And so very clearly from the onset, it was anticipated that the 1969 OAU Convention could apply to some of the challenges that the world is being faced today, and especially that Africa is being faced today in terms of climate change and disasters. Yet, state policies, practice, and case law in applying this concept of events seriously disturbing public order has been extremely limited. And George Okotobo reminded us in his seminal reflection on the 30 years of the OAU Convention that the true test to the novel and forward-looking features of the OAU Convention should rest on its actual implementation in response to serious and overgrowing challenges faced by refugees in Africa. And so the novelty of the convention should be tested with whether in fact it is being applied to the nature of the challenges that we are seeing today, including whether it's being applied to the challenges that are inherent to disaster and climate change. The reality is that in fact, the applicability per se of the convention remains very limited to this content, although it should be applied, but its actual applicability and its actual invocation remains limited. This is why we consider that now is the time to expand the promises of inclusion and solidarity enshrined in the broader definition of the OAU Convention. This effort should be, as you pointed to, Tamara, it should be a broader effort. It should involve a lato sensu understanding of what the refugee normative and institutional framework is in Africa. It should look at the 1969 Convention, but it should go beyond the 1969 Convention to also involve the whole array of relevant human rights norms, principles, and institutions that could be brought to bear insofar as the protection of refugees are concerned. And this should involve the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, its special rapporteur on refugees, asylum seekers, internally displaced persons, and migrants in Africa. It should also involve the frameworks that are offered by regional economic commissions across the continent. We are very pleased with the fact that this network is coming up with the research agenda, but also outlining critical questions that will help us better understand and consider how to ensure that the 1969 Convention is better applied to the challenges of today. And this is, and that we end here, this is even more so important, especially as we are confronted with xenophobia, the instrumentalization of the global and regional asylum spaces. This dialogue should involve also, very importantly, the lived experiences and perspectives of the people affected by climate change and disasters, whether within the country or across borders. And so I will stop here on those preliminary reflections. Back to you, Tamara.
Thank you so much, Patrick. Your comments really draw out some of the themes that came up in our discussion of refugee law within the workshop series and are also reflected in the research agenda. Questions around legal interpretation, questions around the practical application within refugee status determination procedures, and then those legal questions about the relationship between the different normative frameworks and how other frameworks within Africa should and could inform the application of refugee law. Refugee law, of course, is about people who are displaced in the context of, well, who are displaced for today's discussion, we're talking about in the context of disasters and climate change. Not every person who moves in this context is necessarily displaced, though. Some people will move voluntarily or preemptively to secure a better future, more sustainable livelihoods, and so on. Perhaps if I might turn now to Manuel Marquez Pereira from IOM to ask you, Manuel, to tell us what other frameworks are there within Africa that can facilitate people movement in the context of disasters and climate change. Over to you.
Thank you, Tamara. Thank you, colleagues. It's a pleasure for IOM to join all of you today. And thank you for your question. Allow me to congratulate everyone involved in the launch of this much needed research agenda and research network. We are very confident that the collective work that we are discussing today towards the implementation of the agenda will be significantly important. To answer your question, in the context of regional migration frameworks, to start with the African Union revised migration policy framework for Africa and the Plan of Action 2018-2027, there's a dedicated key pillar on the migration environment nexus. The policy proposes specific strategies to states, including to incorporate environmental considerations in the formulation of national and regional migration management policies to better address environment-related causes of migratory movements. Integrated regional policies are key. We have strong reasons to foresee that migration will be focused on internal or regional flows, so internal mobility will pose new challenges to countries. Integration of environmental, disaster, and climate change considerations in regional migration policies is essential, and so are humanitarian considerations, as they can provide within these policies grounds for people on the move. For example, the ECOWAS Common Approach on Migration has a strong protection component that includes humanitarian assistance and rights protection, which could be used to address major gaps in the nexus between migration and the environment. And at the continental level, states are also advancing the establishment of free movement of persons in Africa, although implementation remains limited. Free movements constitute an opportunity to facilitate cross-border migration and displacement. ECOWAS is the most advanced in its implementation of the Free Movement Protocol. The ECOWAS Common Passport should allow people to move freely within the region, facilitating regular migration pathways for those affected by disasters, climate change, and environmental degradation. Most recently, the Protocol of Free Movement of Persons in the IGAD region was endorsed, and it includes specific provisions and guarantees for people moving across borders in the context of a disaster. In Southern African Development Community, although there is no regional free movement agreement to this date, there are bilateral arrangements between states in the region to assist people in the context of disasters by relaxing visa requirements to access entry and assistance across borders. Labor migration laws and policies also represent an important option for people to move. These policies can support labor migration as adaptation strategy by facilitating temporary and circular labor migration to diversify livelihoods in areas that are particularly impacted by disasters, climate change, and environmental degradation. Lastly, the movement of pastoralists can be supported by transhumance protocols and the implementation based on pastoral cultural calendars, taking into account rainfall patterns and the pasture availability. ECOWAS has passed legislation to specifically facilitate regional livestock and human mobility, and the ECOWAS transhumance protocol acknowledges the effects of climate and environmental conditions. In IGAD region, the implementation of the Roadmap 2130 of the IGAD Protocol of Transhumance establishes transhumance corridors to facilitate movements across borders and the instructions for promoting investment in complementary livelihoods resources for pastoralists and those who have fallen out of production. I will stop here and conclude by reminding IOM's ongoing engagement to support states in developing appropriate laws, policies, emergency operation procedures, and systems to address displacement and migration in the context of disasters, climate change, and environmental degradation. In this broad engagement, research is essential, and IOM stands ready to support. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Manuel, I feel that was a real tour de force of African regional frameworks, and I appreciate you highlighting some of the particularly innovative frameworks that do exist in Africa, including the relatively recently adopted IGAD Free Movement Protocol, which includes specific provisions to ensure access and protection for disaster displaced people. We've been talking so far about refugee law, migration frameworks, transhumance, but the research agenda also looks at fields of law and policy that are not specifically focused on human movement, including climate change and disaster risk reduction. I'll turn now to Mr. Kai Gakpuoth from the African Union and ask you, Kai, what do these other fields have to do with displacement and migration? And perhaps you can share with us, why is disaster risk reduction law and policy relevant to the issue of displacement and migration in the context of disasters and climate change? And how should disaster risk reduction laws and policies address this issue? Over to you, Kai.
Oh, thank you, Tamara, and hearing from Emmanuel and Patrick. I think this agenda is coming together as this is started quite early last year. Disasters, displacement, migration, and vulnerability are quite interlinked and very, and the nexus is quite strong. I just want to highlight that and why it's important to have disaster risk management and climate change policies, to gear toward addressing those the nexus. When a disaster strikes, we all know the outcome is outrageous, and apart from people dying, destruction, you also have people displaced. And most of the time, you have this displacement going to another level, where people migrate perhaps to other places. And although we don't have very strong evidence, what is happening in Mediterranean could also be a consequence of perhaps creeping or small-scale disasters leading to displacement and then migration. And at the same time, migrants also become vulnerable, because they are most of the time people that have lost, most of the things they have, perhaps to disasters or maybe conflict or other human miseries. And most of the time, they become also very vulnerable to disasters again. And when an hazard strikes, they are most affected. So it is really from that angle that this really need to be given special attention, because most often we think of vulnerability from the the usual vulnerability groups, looking at the disabled, women and children and elderly. And perhaps we sometimes forget about these other groups. But also with COVID-19, this came out quite strongly, that we need to review our way of viewing vulnerability in this context. But also, given the current disaster risk context on the continent, the African Risk Index is increasing. And particularly vulnerability aspect has been quite in increase. And I think this is very important. If we have to address vulnerability, we look at this element of displacement. But again, it's not just climate change and disaster risk that is driving displacement. It is also development. And most of the time, we forget that development is a major player in driving disaster risk in the African continent. And if development is not informed, we will continue to see more displacement, and particularly on urban-rural migration context. So I think these are the issues that need to be tackled within that broader issues of mainstreaming disaster risk, and also looking at displacement. But again, also, one of the gaps that has been existing is that we look at mainstreaming from physical risk perspective. Take example, you mainstream disaster risk reduction and climate change in construction of road, but without looking at other social contexts of risk, and then that road may not be used. It may, create conflict. And when there is conflict, nobody will use that road anyway. I think also this is important that we, disaster risk policies and climate change policies also need to take into account other social vulnerabilities. And in this way, I think one of the recommendations we are putting forward, and we are starting discussing with wider stakeholders, is that when you are undertaking conflict assessment or risk assessment, you need to ensure that that risk assessment is taking into account conflict assessment as well. And I think if we start looking at risk from broad angle, not from physical risk perspective, usually looking at natural hazard, natural science, and then we will still continue to leave this angle of vulnerability out, and mostly the aspect of migration and displacement. So really from our part, we have interest in this study, and I think I shared with you this earlier, Tamara, that we have been engaging in developing the Africa Biennial report, and this is part of the AU initiatives to understand disaster risk. And most often it's very hard to get data for creeping disasters or creeping hazards such as drought, which have some sort of long-term impact. It is very easy to know how many people are killed, how many people are displaced when there is a sudden onset disaster. But over time, with these creeping emergencies, the data is quite lacking. And this really underscores the importance of this study. We would really want to know how many people are being displaced because there was failure of crop production due to drought, or maybe because of polyarmyworm that has affected, crop production as well, or perhaps because of the frequency of these events, because we have seen these events are alternating. One day you have hazards like flood, the other day you have drought, the other day you have polyarmyworm, the other day you have locust invasion, the other day you have COVID-19. And perhaps this creates sentiment for people to say, oh, I think it's better to leave. This is becoming too much. This also needs to come out. And I think data is very important. And this research agenda has come at a very, very right time. From our part at the African Union, we are committed and we take keen interest in this study. Through the Africa Science and Technology Advisory Group, which is comprising of 15 African scientists, we are happy to get involved and to support this process moving forward. Thank you very much.
Kai, thank you very much. Your discussion there drew out so many of the very central themes in the research agenda. We'll turn to the research proposals shortly, but in addition to those, the research agenda sets out some general principles that really need to be borne in mind for any research or any policy development on this topic. Questions around the nexus between disasters and other challenges like conflict. The challenges of addressing the different experiences and the different characteristics of sudden versus slow onset impacts as well. So thank you very much. And also finally, the need for integration and mainstreaming and policy integration across the various different fields of law and policy. I'll turn now to George Okoth-Ovo, who knows very well that, the search for better strategies and responses to human mobility is arguably one of the defining challenges of the 21st century. And in your role recently as the Secretariat for the High-Level Panel on Internal Displacement, George, you've led an extensive process of consultation to identify solutions for populations displaced internally, so within their own borders. Could you share with us some of the key findings of that process, in particular how they could support African states dealing with internal displacement in the disaster and climate change context? Over to you, George.
Tamara, good afternoon, I think, where you are, but where I am, it is still good morning. I'm really so delighted to be here, to renew my acquaintance with those who are in this conversation that I know from before. But of course, it is never too late to meet and interlock with others. I too would like to start by really extending warm congratulations for the elaboration and launch of this research agenda. I wish it very well indeed. And I think if the panel itself was here speaking and had only 45 seconds, Tamara, to answer the question you have posed to me, the panel would be saying it finds a lot in the research agenda that really could be seen as taking a step forward in what it has asked for, both globally and in Africa. So since I have some other 5 or so minutes to speak to your question, I have tried to look at the relevance of the panel's report in the African context, but to envision that via the research agenda. So if the panel was looking at capitalizing on the research agenda in the context of Africa, what are some key things that it would be saying and which I'll try to say? I've come up with about some 4 key questions. The first one, Tamara, is that the panel itself identified as the research agenda does the knowledge gap. And as you will have seen in the report, it particularly evokes academia and knowledge production as an important part of the way in which the recommendations would go forward, its recommendations would go forward in Africa. So this is the first point, really, that this knowledge creation is really a key part of how things should move forward. And in coming here, and later on, I'll try to stay for the second segment of this meeting, because some of the things that I would like to understand in terms of the interest of the panel and its report is just the way this knowledge landscape has been framed in the research agenda. It is clearly law and policy, and if you will have read the report, across all the 9 fundamental recommendations that the panel has made, almost for all of them, literally, I would say the starting point is law and policy. So I think the panel would be very interested in this research agenda, in that it is almost the opening plank for the implementation of many of the things that it says. Now, having said that, I have then looked at the research agenda from the point of view of scope of the agenda itself. And of course, it is an agenda that is rooted very much in law and policy, and indeed more than that. But I think from the point of view of the panels, the interest it would have is how this research agenda then interacts with other areas of knowledge that are key to what the report says, including in the African context. And we have just heard from Gatworth some of the key ones. Where, for example, is the knowledge the knowledge creation with respect, for instance, to decertification? If we look at an area that is itself also governed by a lot of normative and policy construction, i.e. the riverine and lake basins on the African continent, in which a lot of what the research agenda is concerned about really plays out. Let's take the Lake Chad Basin, for example. How does that figure within the research agenda? How are the actors on this research agenda going to link with the other players, whether networks, academia, etc., that are also looking at these questions? And lastly, on the knowledge production, how will this research agenda, the actors of this agenda, interlink with by far the biggest player for purposes of what the report is asking to happen, governments themselves? Will they be the ones who come to the research agenda and say, you know, that one is of interest to us? Or, I mean, how will that? So this is the first point coming out of the report. The second one is that the panel itself really learned a lot from the Africa region, and particularly the Kampala Convention And other regimes that my colleague Patrick talked about earlier on. Good morning to you, Patrick. We have to make an arrangement to meet. Through to the question of implementation. So there again, I mean, that's what the panel says for everybody, including the African context. But on the implementation issue, I think it had to learn from and did learn a lot from the Africa region. There too, the discussion point, Tamara, would be the province of implementation, because a lot of the knowledge that came to the panel on the implementation question really walked through two main doors, i.e. the door of normative creation, the Kampala Convention, and the door of domestication. But probably when you look at the African context, as indeed everywhere else, there are the two doors. And I looked at the agenda and was very interested in this. The first of these is government behavior, especially in governance and accountability, because that's where ultimately it is. I think there, even the report itself goes only so far. And I think if the panel was working long-term with the research agenda, it would be looking for that step. How do we actually get into creating behavioral responses to the question of implementation? And then the last one, something that I learned myself from my UNHCR experience, is that the province of law and implementation, I think we perhaps tend to frame it too classically, i.e. within mobility, forced mobility. So we look at the Refugee Convention, the Kampala Convention, the others that we had earlier on from Manuel, and these are all important. But particularly when one comes to climate change, other domains, if we look at natural resources law, for example, staying within law and policy, perhaps that would have an equal, in some instances, a bigger role than others. So that would be the other discussion point, Tamara, that I think the panel would be interested in. How do we scope this, particularly in terms of penetrating all the domains of normative response that we would be looking for from government? I have two more points and I'll finish. The first of those is that, of course, the panel dealt across the board from prevention to humanitarian response through to solutions. But if you have seen the report, the mainstay of the report is on solutions. And that is solutions that is framed, as you said yourself, Tamara, in your opening remarks, about integration, about being able to be, being able to stay. Here, I think is, and this is particularly important in the African context, whether for displacement coming out of conflict or displacement coming out of disasters and climate change, we see people going into generations of displacement. So solutions is a very fundamental question. I have looked 3 times through the research agenda on this question of solutions. And it would be unfair to say it doesn't appear, but certainly if the research agenda was now picking up on what the panel said and trying to help that in the African context, that is an area where some perhaps additional questions would have to be added onto to that agenda. There is a lot that the panel says in this. I think the core of it is this framing solutions as a development questions. Again, law and policy have a lot to do with that. But Gatquoth, for example, was mentioning development, for example. How do we conceptualize development in normative and policy terms? If we look through the Kampala Convention, do we find landings for that, for what we are looking for in, of course, a lot of it in there, but perhaps a little bit more as well. And then finally, to conclude, and here now you are hearing more George, the citizen of the world, than the secretary of the Kampala Convention. The secretary of the panel. And I just want to share 3 points. The first one of them is the adequacy of mobility as the model. Especially at the beginning, mobility obviously is the language. But quite frankly, so many of the situations that we see in Africa are characterized in their true nature after the initial mobility by sedimentation. People are locked in places, horrible situations. So that model, which obviously influences a lot of the choices of the research agenda, how could it be added to? How could, if we are looking at questions of, for example, resettlement, if we're looking at questions of integration, if we're looking at indeed even relocation, and I'll really stay to hear that, how does mobility remain the model that takes us forward? The second of the reflections is, I am not saying, the risk that I would see as a citizen of the world is that in this domain of knowledge creation and filling gaps, that we do not erect too big a border between the external dimension of displacement and its internal character. When I was at UNHCR, I always felt that this was a borderline which was necessary. It is doctrinal, it is conceptual, but it also harmed the links that often need to be made, especially in the context of solutions between the external dimension, refugees, and the internal dimension. So I am hoping that, for example, if we were looking at the normative regimes in the African continent, that the 69 OAU Convention would be coupled just as strongly by the Banjul Charter, which when you look at in terms of the issues that would relate to solutions in the displacement context, has far greater catalogs than the 69 OAU Convention. So if this perhaps bridge would not be maintained as sharply as has been maintained in different domains. And finally, the dichotomy between global, regional on one side and national law. I think it would be dangerous to propagate the notion that the normative regime is application domestically of only global and regional law, as opposed, as I said earlier on, to touch points of law which are already vast and veritable, even for countries that are not signatories to the Kampala Convention. That in fact, when you look at it from the point of view of municipal law, some of them are already at 70% in terms of the platform that is required than if they were only to adopt and apply the Kampala Convention for purposes of what we are discussing. I know you are a forgiving person, so you're going to bear with me for having taken so long, but I stop here now, and thank you so much for listening to me.
And thank you so much, George, citizen of the world, and as well as Secretariat of the high-level panel. You've really drawn out so many of the complexities, and the fact that, you know, the research agenda is really contained in its scope, you know, in terms of the recommendations it makes. But we do hope very much, and with the launch of the research network as well, which will follow this first part of this event, that it is just a first step. And thank you so much for sharing many reflections and suggestions, if I take them correctly, for how that work could evolve into the future as well. There is so much to talk about and so little time, and we have only 4 minutes left for this first part of the launch event. What I would like to do, though, is to return to each of our speakers, and perhaps I can give you just 1 minute each if you cooperate with me on that one, to share your reflections on the recommendations for research that are set out in the research agenda itself. Patrick, if I might begin with you, and there are a number of recommendations in the research agenda that relate to refugee law and human rights law, and particularly to protection issues for displaced people. What are the key priorities in there for UNHCR, and what plans does UNHCR have to advance on some of these questions? Over to you, your 1 minute starts now. Thank you. Patrick, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I don't hear you very well. It may just be your microphone.
Maybe he's muted.
Better now.
Yes, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you, Tamara. We at UNHCR see the research proposal as a strong, all-encompassing list of which all seem to us to be extremely relevant. But we would like to say that we are very interested in supporting some of those areas that are squarely related to refugee protection, but also to human rights law, picking back on the comment that George made about the fact that we need to look at these issues at the normative framework in a holistic way, bringing together refugee protection together with human rights law. And so in that regard, Proposal 6, as well as Proposal 7 and 13 are very relevant to UNHCR, and we will look at ways to support through 3 modalities. The first one is that we are interested in supporting directly some of the research papers, including exploring the possibilities to provide direct financial support to the extent possible. We are also interested in providing in-kind support in the nature of providing comments as well as expert suggestions to some of the key elements of those areas relating to refugee protection and human rights. And then the third way we want to support the research agenda going forward is that we would like to contribute to giving visibility and ensuring that some of the work are actually used in practice. And we would like to offer the possibility of helping disseminating some of the papers, including through our legal and protection policy research series, which are very well looked at and consulted by academics and professionals and governments across the world. But in addition, we are also very interested in seeing how some of the key outcomes, concrete outcomes from the research and analysis could actually be used in shaping regional and global policy. And we are very interested, and we'll be looking forward to some of those concrete approaches and suggestions that can help move forward the understanding of law and policies as it relates to the issues of climate change and disaster across Africa. So again, let me end by saying that we are very, very pleased to be part of this initiative, and we would like to congratulate all of those who are involved, and we very much look forward to supporting this research agenda, which is a much needed one, especially today.
Patrick, thank you so much for your kind words and for that wonderful commitment from UNHCR to supporting the research recommendations, but also supporting that research to then be used effectively, which of course is just as critical as the knowledge that is produced in the first place. Manuel, if I might turn to you and ask you the same question, that, you know, for IOM, where do the priorities lie in the research agenda, and what plans does IOM have in terms of future work in this area?
Thank you, Tamara. I think that it's easier to say that IOM started first researching the migration and climate change in 1992 was our first research, and we have not stopped. So we will for sure continue on that. I would say that 2 pillars, let's say 2 areas of main research proposal 14 that aims to analyze impacts of displacement and migration in the context of disasters and climate change in urban communities, urbanization, the questions of rural-urban migration, and development migration within countries are a priority to us, and the work with the Mayors Migration Council and other forum related to that. So around Proposal 14 is a pillar, but also in relation with Proposal 2, but considering also 11, 14, and 15, we will continue our work with IDMC, UNDRR, and other partners to develop displacement indicators to support and monitor the implementation of the RR efforts related to internal displacement. We will have next year the global platform on DRR, and we think there is strong connections on research and understanding a bit these dynamics over the next years and the data for that. So we are engaging partners on the community of researchers. Please get in touch with us. And finally, to say that we'll continue and promote the broader research and policy agenda within the different forum and partnerships we have across the continent. It's very important the association of these discussions and these initiatives with also sustainable development will be a critical discussion in the future times ahead. And I think I will end here. Migration and climate change is a very sensitive topic in some quarters. So research can help us remove myths, bring truth and common sense.
People, when they pay them like this, you can't enter the.
Apologies for the disruption there, Manuel. Have you finished, or would you like to add a final word?
No, it was just I finished exactly when the voice came in. Thank you so much.
Wonderful, and thank you so much. We're very grateful to IOM for the support so far and to continuing that into the future. I'll turn to Mr. Kai now, and Kai, if in 1 minute you might like to share with us the key priorities for you and the African Union in your work in the research agenda and your own plans in terms of future advancing on these ideas. Kai, over to you.
Thank you, Tamara. And having heard from the citizen of the world, my brother Okot, I think I can't believe there is something left, really. He has covered much of the topic extensively. But just two things moving forward. I think there is an opportunity to bring these issues on board in the Africa Biennial reporting development process, and to ensure that indicators relating to displacement and migration are actually taken on board so that they are also reported to the AU policy organ. I think there is an opportunity there with this process. The second component is that we will need to have further engagement with you through the Africa Science and Technology Advisory Group. And we would recommend that the abstract take this agenda as one of its priority moving forward, as it is setting its agenda. I know they're working on a number of issues, including on governance, and I think this agenda is coming timely to be able, this can be incorporated in this process. So I think that is all from my side. We remain committed and available to further discussion on this agenda. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kai, and we really look forward also to that continued collaboration, and particularly within the research network and further discussions there. George, if I may come back to you for your one final minute, if there's anything you'd like to share with us on what you see as the key priorities in the research agenda. Over to you.
Yes, and I promise you it will be no more than 1 minute. Tamara, each one of these 15 research proposals, you could literally match in every one of them to an actual recommendation in the panel's report, which is to say all of them are relevant and apply. If you pressed me to choose just one, I think it would have to be number 1, because it is overarching and it really highlights and brings knowledge around the question of internal displacement linked to climate change. Now, the report itself, if there is one thing on which it grounds the shift that it is asking for, it is national political will and ownership. Call that accountability. So if your question to me had been rather, George, is there something else you would like to see in here? My answer to that would be to link all these research proposals to government behavior. How does it actually happen? How does the whole of government work? What are the things that we should do so that, other than having typically as the interlocutor for all these issues in many places is the National Refugee Commissioner not even the National Internal Displacement Commissioner. If we had a research item that looks at the government, governance, accountability, how it is all translated, that would be my answer. If your question had been, what else could we add to here? And thank you very much. That is the end of what I would add now.
Thank you so much, George. Perhaps that can be the virtual workshop series for 2022. I think that's a really good place to end, to think about, you know, there's a whole lot of priorities in terms of research and how can we both implement those and then look at how they support the other key ingredients. I'm going to hand back to Edwin now. I'm sure I'm going to be in plenty of trouble because he is a much stricter timekeeper than I am, and we now have very small amount of time to wrap up before we move to launch the research network. Edwin, back to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tamara. And to all the participants, I'm a good person, not the person that Tamara wants to paint me as. Yeah. Thank you so much to all the panelists, the great discussion and great insights to some of the stuff that maybe were left out in the document. And also it's interesting just to hear from you who work in the area on areas of possible collaboration, and I'm sure those will be picked. Now, I mentioned earlier that there were a couple of partners who helped to bring the research agenda together. Some of them are here in the group on this call, and I just want to give them again maybe 1 minute, maybe just 35 seconds, just to take the floor and to share their response on the research agenda. So I'm going to call them one by one. Atle, are you here? Atle PDD? Thank you. Nice to see you again, Atle. You're labeled as Sarah, but I know that's Atle who is with us today. So Atle, please go on.
Sorry about that. It means I used her link probably to join the meeting. So thank you so much, Edwin. And my name is Atle Solberg. I'm head of the Secretariat of the Platform on Disaster Displacement. I'm joining you from Geneva. I think I need a bit more than 35 seconds, Edwin, because I really would like to congratulate you and Tamara and all the partners for such a great event and for being now in a moment where something is closing and something is starting. So I want to congratulate you on that. We as Platform on Disaster Displacement is a state-led initiative. We are currently under the leadership of Fiji, and we very much look into the human mobility challenges and needs in context of disaster and adverse effect of climate change. And the focus is how do we address those needs and challenges with policy tools, and what are the protection needs of these people. Very much of what we do sits at that intersection between research, evidence, and knowledge, and a policy discussion. So for us, research and knowledge creation, as George said, is very important. And that is also why we joined this virtual workshop last year from April to July. And we are very enthusiastically joining you in your next leg to launch the research network. We heard today there are still gaps in evidence and knowledge, and we have a lot to do, both to address those gaps, but also to bring that knowledge into our policy discussion and policy development. We are very excited. I'm looking at the number of participants today, but also about the uptake for your initiative and our initiative, the interest the research agenda and the research network has generated. And as I said, maybe this is the closing of the research agenda. It's all about implementing it, but then we will also hear more about the research network, which will start. And I just wanted to say that we, as the Platform on Disaster Displacement, both in my capacity as head of the Secretariat, but also on behalf of the broader platform of PDD, we are committed to engage in this process as we go forward. When you look at the research agenda, I think there are several thematic areas that we would like to support and drive forward. Number one, and George just said it, something about conceptualization of displacement in the context of climate change as loss and damage. That's going to be very important for us. We are just ending our engagement in the Conference of the Parties in Glasgow under the Framework Convention on Climate Change. Next year, there is an African Conference of the Parties in Egypt, and maybe that is an area where we will talk a lot in the coming years around loss and damage and displacement and loss and damage. And maybe we could all go together to Egypt in November last year with some research output on that. For us, planned relocation research is important. This is an understudied area, free movement of person processes. I feel quite confident that many of these research items will be covered by our partners in IOM and UNHCR, but we also stand ready to chip in if something is needed. We want to bring knowledge and evidence into policy discussions. That's why we are engaging in this process. And you can count on us as being an active partner as you develop your network. Before I close, and I know this is much more than the 30 seconds you gave to me, I want to thank Tamara from the Calder Center, Tamara Wood, for the leadership in this process, and also to thank Dr. Nicodemus Nyandiko from the Masinde Muliro University of Science and Technology for having taken on responsibility to coordinate the network. So that's all from me and colleagues, Edwin, and again, congratulations for a great job today and in the past and future.
Thank you. Thank you. It took only 36 seconds, so we are still within time. Thank you. Thank you so much. Lena IGAD, Secretariat, please. Lena?
Yes.
There you go, Lena.
Very good. I hope you can hear and see me. So
Correct.
Greetings also from IGAD. So my name is Lena and I'm the Disaster Displacement Advisor at IGAD, normally based in Djibouti, but right now I'm just joining you from a conference in Nairobi. So good morning and also good evening, I think, to the ones that are sitting on the other side of the world. And also I hope that I will not be too long. I will probably also be a little bit more than 35 seconds, but just also from IGAD side to say that really we want to congratulate everyone for this excellent work. And I think we have been part of it since the very beginning. And I think at the very beginning when we wanted to meet and organize a meeting in South Africa, and even though, of course, I think everyone would have liked to be in South Africa and to have this dialogue in person, I think this example was actually quite nice to see that sometimes this new way of working and the new technologies also allow us to be broader, to be wider, and to come up with a much more holistic. And so I think this approach that you have taken, I think, was very important and very useful. And I think just also to commit from IGAD side that, of course, we will continue to be engaged also when it comes to the implementation of this research agenda. And I think as some of the colleagues have said also before, also for IGAD side, I mean, if we have to say that we need to prioritize or pick some of the proposals, I can just say that actually, like, IGAD would be involved in all of these different priorities, because all of these priorities are also priorities for IGAD. But if we have to pick one, I think one of the most eminent ones and immediate ones, of course, is the Free Movement of Persons Protocol and the proposal that is linked to that one, because yeah, as you have heard already, this is a new protocol. It is specifically speaking about disaster displacement, but of course now it is about implementation. And here, of course, it is very important that we really have the evidence base, that we have the knowledge and what can and needs to be done to actually help the implementation of this protocol. So I will stop here, just quickly and shortly say again from IGAD side as well, there is commitment to be and to continue to be engaged, and congratulations again on this excellent work. Thank you.
Thank you, Lena, and enjoy your stay in Nairobi. The next, I don't know whether we are here, GIZ, German Development Agency. Any rep from GIZ? Okay.
Edwin, I think unless there is anyone who wants to take the floor, we can probably wrap up for this component, okay, and hand over for the next one. Thank you.
Okay. Oh yeah, actually. Anyone else who wants to pitch? We've seen a couple of people on the chat also saying we want to work together. So we are going to pick that up. So in the interest of time, I want to declare the research agenda is now officially launched. I'd like to ask you to hang in there. We move on to the second part, and I give Nicodemus, are you there? I want to hand over to you the button. Nicodemus?
Yes, I'm live very much. Thank you very much, Professor Abuya. This is Nicodemus Nyandiko, Senior Lecturer from Masinde Muliro University of Science and Technology, and the current co-chair of the Climate Mobility Africa Research Network. Thank you very much for the area speakers for the excellent insights you have shared. And we are looking forward to working with you. And in the interest of time, I want to warmly welcome all of you to this second part dedicated to launching the research network, Climate Mobility Africa Research Network. And with me here, I want to welcome my Vice Chancellor, Professor Solomon Ashbailo, to give a keynote address. And from there, we'll proceed later on with an overview of the research network, the activities and the objectives. And from there, we'll wind up the day. Thank you. Welcome, Professor Solomon Spiro, the Vice Chancellor, Masinde Muliro University of Science and Technology. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Volume down. I hope you are hearing me. My name is Professor Solomon Igosangwa Shibairo. I'm the Vice Chancellor, Masinde Muliro University of Science and Technology. A Carter Center for Refugee Studies, International Organization for Migration, representatives of universities present, Deputy Vice Chancellors, deans and directors, organizers of this event, Chairman of Climate Mobility Africa Research Network, Dr. Nicodemus Nyandiko, and members of Climate Mobility Africa Research Network, the friends of the network, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the University Council, management and staff of Masinde Muliro University of Science and Technology, I'm happy to join you all on this auspicious occasion of the official launch. I'm okay. You're listening to me. There's no sound because I've put in this volume up. Hearing me. You are all hearing me. If you are not, you raise up your hand. On behalf of the University Council Management Staff of Masinde Muliro University of Science and Technology, I'm happy to join you on all this auspicious occasion of the official launch of Climate Mobility Africa Research Network. I extend a very warm welcome to you all during this official launch. I understand this was an outcome of a series of virtual workshops that has produced a research agenda for Africa, leading to the establishment of a steering group to spearhead research addressing human mobility in the context of disasters and climate change in Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, as you are aware, disasters aggravated by climate change have continued to wreak havoc in Africa, leading to massive displacements on this continent. In 2020 alone, disasters, particularly flooding, triggered 4.3 million new displacements. This was a multiple tragedy as the continent was already grappling with the other crises, which comprise of conflicts, COVID-19 pandemic, locust infestation, and food insecurity, among others. Climate variability is projected to exacerbate the frequency and intensity of these disasters, making the displacements worse. This will require enabling policies and strategies supported by solid evidence as a basis for decision making that will facilitate movement of persons in the event of a crisis. Often there are gaps in policies, lack of data and evidence to inform decision makers on appropriate responses to displacement crisis in Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, universities and research organizations have a critical role to play in bridging this knowledge gap in Africa. I'm proud to inform this meeting that Masinde Muliro University of Science and Technology is ready and willing to support the research network as the current co-chair and administrator. The university has the critical research infrastructure and is fully supported by the University Council and a dedicated Deputy Vice Chancellor in charge of planning, research and innovation to coordinate research activities around this theme. Masinde Muliro University of Science and Technology is ranked among the top universities in Kenya and ISO 9001-2015 certified. Our current strategic plan and research policy have identified research, innovation, and extension services as critical pillars. This shall be leveraged on to support this research network. Ladies and gentlemen, despite the many challenges facing Kenyan universities in particular, MUS continues to deliver on her mandate in line with her vision and mission. The university has continued to deliver on her mandate as an obligation to the intellectual, cultural, and economic benefit to society. The university currently offers cutting-edge teaching and research on many themes related to displacement in the context of disasters, climate change, and conflict. Besides, most research and training are closely aligned to Kenya's Vision 2030, the country's long-term economic blueprint that seeks to transform Kenya into a middle-income country by 2030. We shall leverage on the university's strong linkages with the other universities to support implementation of this research agenda. Currently, the university has a total of 11 schools, including medicine, nursing, education, agriculture, and disaster management, amongst others. The research network shall be domiciled in the Department of Disaster Management and Sustainable Development in the School of Disaster Management and Humanitarian Assistance. Established in 2004, SIDMA, that's the abbreviation of the School of Disaster Management and Humanitarian Assistance, is the first of its kind in the Eastern African region, with the academic programs strongly linked to displacement in the context of disasters and climate change. The school is active in research and teaching relevant to displacement, as is evident by the current academic programs, theses, and publications in reference journals. My university will support Africa to roll out this important research network in order to find solutions to address the risk of displacement and provide long-term solutions to those that are displaced and affected by disasters and climate change. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Again, I say welcome to Masinde Muliro University of Science and Technology. Asanteni sana.
Thank you very much, Professor Solomon Spailo, the Vice Chancellor of Masinde Muliro University of Science and Technology, for that intervention and your commitment towards ensuring that this research agenda and the research network on climate mobility in Africa is going to achieve its objectives. At this moment, I want to extend a welcome to Dr. Tamara Good to give an overview of the research network, and then I'll come back to give the research network activities and objectives. Welcome, Dr. Tamara Good.
Thank you so much, Nicodemus, and thank you very, very much, Vice Chancellor, for your very enlightening words and for your university's commitment to hosting and supporting the research network in this way. I feel we will be in very safe hands with Masinda Muliro University, and really looking forward to seeing the research network established there and grow and flourish into the future. Just a couple of words from me on where this research network has come from. Those of you who participated in the virtual workshop series will recall that this was always one of the hoped outcomes of the workshop series, that in addition to identifying key knowledge gaps, proposals for future research on this topic, that we would also bring together researchers who are equipped and ready to do that research, as well as many, many others, policymakers, practitioners, judicial officers, other experts to collaborate in that future research. We received feedback from many of you during the virtual workshop series to say that that series was the first time that you'd really had the opportunity to come together with so many other people working in or on this topic and to discuss, collaborate, share ideas and learn from each other. And we very much don't want that process to conclude with the research agenda. Rather, we want this to just be the beginning. Nicodemus will share some information about what the network is going to look like, how it will be run, some activities that we have planned, and other colleagues of ours on the steering group will share some information about how you can join. We really hope that you'll all sign up and we'll be able to continue this conversation in the new year. I'd like to just share a couple of things about the relationship between the research agenda, which we've just launched, and the research network, which we're launching right now. And I guess that I see, this is a very special relationship between the research agenda and the research network. And that we hope this will play out in three particular ways. Firstly, we hope that the research network will be a place where researchers come together and connect with each other and find ways to collaborate to advance on the research proposals in the research agenda. So we hope that you will all come and join the network, that you will take up the research agenda, and that in your own work, in your own research plans, in your own institutions, you will find ways to advance on the research that is proposed there. The second important point about the relationship between the research agenda and the research network is that we hope that our partners, that institutions who wish to collaborate and to support future research in this field will see the research network as a place to come and to find the researchers who are willing and ready to do that research. And thirdly, as I said, the launch of the research agenda should be seen as not only the end of one process, but also the beginning of another one. The research network will provide us a platform and an excuse to come together and hear about how the research agenda is being implemented, what research is being done, what impact that is having. So I very much look forward to seeing you for the network's activities and meetings and events next year and to continuing this conversation. Back to you, Nicodemus.
Thank you very much, Tamara, for that intervention. It is quite informative, and it's clear that the research network is the outcome of the research agenda, which we have just launched, and Dr. Professor Abuya was chairing the session. And here now we are launching the research network. And as Tamara's rightly observed and other speakers, this is going to support production of knowledge and ideas that are going to bridge the gap, knowledge gaps that are existing in policies and the laws that are applied in the arena of migration and displacement in the context of disasters and climate change in Africa. And one is that this research network is bringing up researchers in Africa who are actively involved in research activities, touching on migration and displacement in the context of disasters and climate change. Then it has, we have developed a number of activities which we are going to share with you. And terms of reference for the research network, which has a number of objectives which we want to fulfill. And based on pledges and support which we expect from Masinde Muliro University and 4 other universities in Africa that have come together to support this research network, we are likely to achieve this with the support of also from other partners. And what are the key issues that we are looking at, the objectives of this network? The research network is focused on looking at the supporting and promoting a critical and independent research by African researchers on law and policy that is contextualized to disasters and climate change, so that from that research, we can get strong evidence, a solid evidence base that's going to support development or a strengthening of the existing policy frameworks that are existing at the continental, regional, and country levels. There is other objective which is going to be achieved from this network is to foster and promote cooperation the African researchers and also policy experts, so that they can work together in finding solutions, as we have heard from earlier speakers, solutions that are going to avert the risk of displacement. And if displacement were to occur, these policies and laws should be able to provide for orderly and safe migration or movement of persons. And ultimately, if displaced persons are within the borders or outside the borders of their countries, these frameworks should be able to support durable solutions at the end of the day. And then the third objective, we also seek to develop capacity and the knowledge of researchers from Africa, so that they are able to reach on the same page. And this also, we are going to focus mostly on young scholars and academics to bring them together. Those ones who are pursuing masters and PhD, working on displacement and migration in light of this climate change and disasters. This is also one of our key activities. So these researchers, we are going to look at from multidisciplinary perspectives, because we have heard previous from the speakers from the research agenda. The problems which are there to be achieved from these to the solutions need a multidisciplinary perspectives. You need people with background in law. We need background people with healthy perspectives, with experts or policymakers and researchers with background in engineering, in mathematics and modeling, and all these aspects. So these researchers need to work together collaboratively in order to find these solutions to avert the risk of displacement, or if displacement was to take place, it is in an orderly manner, or if it has taken place, there are durable solutions for that. Then, of course, we have had challenges when we have been meeting, planning for this event. And this is because Africa is multilingual. And therefore, we also seek to find a solution to that, so that we are able to communicate across the continent if we get support. What is the structure of this network? We are seeing 3 key levels of the network. One is the steering committee, the steering group, that's consisting currently of 7 researchers from Africa and also from outside that have been active in the arena of displacement and migration from different disciplines. And we are going to introduce them shortly thereafter. And then, of course, the second level is we have the administrator of the network. The administrator is going to be involved in the day-to-day activities. He can be employed for 1 or 2 days a month based on activities that are going to be implemented, and they can support the network in terms of operational activities, communication, emailing, sharing information, convening meetings, and taking the minutes of the network members. So we need that second level of structure. The third structure is the friends of the network. The friends of the network will consist of scientists and policymakers who are interested in displacement and migration in the context of climate change and disasters, but they are not based in Africa. They could be based in Europe. Like, for example, currently we have the Calda Refugee Study Center from Australia, which has been very supportive. And that can also qualify to be friends of the network and many others. So already we have 2 organizations which are pledged support to be friends of the network, to collaborate with the African researchers and build their capacity and support them to realize and achieve the objectives of the research agenda. And that brings into the issue of how do you become a member of the research network? How do you become a member of the research network? And what are their activities? What are the key activities that I want to be involved in? The major activities that we are going to create undertake include the following. We are seeing the next 1 year after the launch from today, November 30th. In the next 1 year, we have outlined 4 main activities, and therefore that need a lot of support across the continent and from our partners. One is we need to create a virtual space where the researchers can create, share information and exchange ideas. That includes creating a website. And I want to inform you right now, as we are launching this network, already we have a preliminary website which has been developed and is due. It will be live in the next 1 or 2 days. And then that also requires sharing information through emails, having with the members of the network and the friends. That will be very important. The other second activity that we foreseeing in the next 1 year is networking events, both virtual and physical, that members of the research network from Africa are able to share research ideas, collaborate, and develop research proposals together across various universities and across various countries in support with our partners. And we try to come up with this kind of proposal so that we can be able to find solutions for these challenges. Then the third will be having a series of webinars and presentations by experts on displacement and migration by various researchers and policy makers, so that we can keep on exchanging these ideas and knowledge in this field. And this is also closely linked to doing the research policy roundtable events. After developing the evidence, the solid evidence, we can have policy research roundtable discussions. We're seeing that we can exchange ideas through those platforms so that we can cross-fertilize ideas among the experts and the researchers. And the other activities which might go beyond 2022 is we are seeing if we are able to get resources based on availability of resources. We are seeing that we'll have a conference .
Nicodemus, you're muted.
Nicodemus, please unmute. Please unmute.
Sorry. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can rewind a bit. I said the other activities include, we are foreseeing in the next beyond 2022, we'll have a continental conference on a disaster and climate change related issues on displacement and migration. And then we'll also support the network and support development of policy briefs for dissemination to the regional economic communities and the member states. And then we are also seeing that there is a possibility that we can develop a journal dedicated to Africa on issues of migration and displacement in the context of climate change and disasters, among other activities which we have developed. I think in the interest of time, at this point, I request my colleague in the steering group to explain and in the next 3-5 minutes, how you can be a member of the research network and the procedure of taking up that procedure, the steps. I want to invite Dr. Annette Okoth to take the floor. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nyandiko, for that brief concerning the activities that have been lined up for the network as it gets started. I want to quickly and briefly run through membership to the network. We have 2 categories of membership. One can join as a member or as a friend of the network. So as a member, as an individual, you can join as a member or you can join as a friend to the network. So who are the members? Who can join as members of the network? These are individual researchers or policy experts, and this would include policymakers, practitioners, civil society representatives working in fields relating to displacement and migration in the context of disasters and climate change in Africa. Some of the relevant fields would include, but not limited to, the following: climate change, disaster risk management, migration, free movement of persons, transhumance, human rights, refugee protection, internally displaced persons protection, and planned relocation. Now, those who are interested in joining the network but do not meet the criteria highlighted above can join as friends of the network. This may include organizations, institutions, either based in Africa or outside Africa, who wish to support the activities of the network in one way or another. This may also include individuals who maybe do not meet the criteria given above, but have an interest in supporting the agenda of the network. What are the benefits of being a member of the network? Number one, members will be able to join events organized by the network, including the bi-monthly webinars and an annual research policy roundtable. Members will be able to network with other researchers and policy experts via the network. They will be able to share their research, resources, opportunities with other researchers and policy experts through the network. They will also benefit from receiving regular communication about the research, resources, opportunities relating to displacement and migration in the context of disasters and climate change. Now, members of the network will be welcome immediately after this launch to join the network by registering through the link to the website of the network that has already been provided through the chat. What are some of the benefits of friends to the network? Friends will be allowed to share research, resources, opportunities with other researchers and policy experts through the network. Friends can also be invited to events of the network. They can also join ad hoc public events held by the network. Now, friends who would wish to communicate with the network could do this through the administrator, who will soon be unveiled through the website of the network. And the annual newsletter that will be released by the network is one of the ways through which friends of the network can also get to learn more about the network. And if there's any support they feel like they could give to the network, they are welcome to do so. Thank you so much. I take this back to Dr. Nyandiko.
Thank you very much, Dr. Annette Okoth, for those background information, very clear on how to be a member of the Climate Mobility Africa Research Network, and what are the conditions. The condition is that you have to be a researcher or a policy maker or experts in Africa at the continental, regional, or a member state level to be a member. There is no payment, it's free, but you have to be from Africa. Then two, there are also another category, that's friends of the network, and that clarification has been excellently elaborated by Annette. Now, I want to request Tamara to share the link for the website so that members can start the process of interacting with the website, though it's at a very preliminary stage of development, and they can get access to these forms to share so that they can be members as from today. Now, at this moment, I want to, you can't move towards the conclusion by requesting members of the steering group that has done a lot of work. Some of them started working all the way from last year through the workshop series, organizing the workshop series, and later on they formed the ad hoc steering committee or group members to discuss on how to roll out the research agenda. Now the research agenda today was formally launched, and then now we are launching the research network to take forward the research agenda. Now you can see the names of the members of the steering group members. Starting from Dr. Nicodemus Nyandiko from Kenya, Masinde Muliro University, is the current co-chair, together with Dr. Tamara Good. Tamara Good is from Calder Center for International Refugee Law, Australia. That is for the first year. But then the next year, the chair will go to another university, and we have seeing that agreed it will go to Fender University in South Africa. The other one is Professor Edwin Abuya of University of Nairobi, Kenya, who has been the chair of the first session of this event today. Dr. Tojin Adewoana Osho from the University of Lagos, Nigeria. The fourth is Dr. Annette Okoth from Masinde Muliro University of Science and Technology. And then Professor Demola Chede from University of Fenda, South Africa. Then we have Dr. Sheikh Tidiane Wade, Asani Seke University, Senegal. There is Dr. Caroline Sikrgraf, Hugo Observatory, University of Riege, the Belgium. And then Christina, we are from the IOM as an observer. So these are the 7 members to date. I think we are 9. We are 9 members of the steering group, and they are already present here. I hope if time allows, I think they can introduce themselves. Tamara Good, you are present. I think you'll come last. Edwin Abuya, once more. Edwin, if you are present still, you can. He was the chair of the first, where part of the Prof might have left. We have Dr. Tojin.
Yes, I'm here.
Dr. Toyin is also not in. And then we have Dr. Okot.
Oh, I'm sorry. Hello, Dr. Toyin is here.
Okay.
Yes. Hello. Good
Thank
morning,
you, Dr.
everyone.
Nyadiko. My name is Dr. Annette Okot from the Department of Mathematics at Masinde Muliro University of Science and Technology. My area of specialization is statistics. I do quite a bit of modeling. So I'm happy to be here.
Okay. Dr. Toyin.
Dr. Toyin is here. Yes. Good morning, everyone. I hope you can all hear me. My name is Oluwatoyin Adejonwo. I am a lecturer at the Faculty of Law, University of Lagos. I'm joining you from Lagos, Nigeria today. Yes, my area of specialization is looking at the governance process of the climate change mechanism. So looking at it in terms of its intersection with loss and damage, in terms of its intersection also with disaster risk and other aspects. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Toyin. Dr. Wade? Professor Ademola, you are in?
Yes, I'm in.
Please introduce yourself, or 30 seconds.
Good afternoon, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It's been a nice time having you around and listening to comments here and there. I am Ademola Jegede. I am with University of Venda School of Law, where I teach and also research. My area of research is on the interface of climate change and biodiversity loss with the rights of vulnerable populations, particularly in Africa. So that's what I do. Many thanks.
Thank you very much, Professor, for that introduction. Good Professor, Dr. Caroline? No, Dr. Wade. Dr. Wade? Dr. Wade might not be in. Dr. Caroline, please.
Nicodemus, Dr. Wade has just unmuted himself. Maybe we just give a moment for the sound to come in.
Yeah. Sorry for that. Dr. Wade, you are unmute and introduce yourself. It's not getting us. Okay, we'll recap back to him. Dr. Caroline?
Hi, yes, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon to some of you. Caroline Zikraf, Nicodemus, you already did a great job introducing me, I think, and I don't want to take too much time. From the Hugo Observatory for Environment, Migration and Politics in Belgium, but specialized mostly in West African research on climate change, migration, and particularly immobility. So looking forward to also operating at the science policy interface as a member of the the expert group on non-economic losses for the UNFCCC. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll be interacting more with other members. Christina has been very supportive in interpreting from my end. Christina?
Yeah, I think Dr. White is trying to take the floor.
Ok, bonjour, je m'appelle Cheikh Tidiane Wade, je suis enseignant-chercheur à l'Université Assane Seck de Ziguinchor. Je travaille sur les questions liées au changement climatique, les dynamiques du monde tropical et surtout les questions d'aménagement au niveau des littoraux. Et ailleurs, je travaille beaucoup sur les questions de migration. Vous informez qu'à ce moment même, je suis avec l'OIM dans le cadre d'un travail sur le PNUD sur les liens entre changement climatique et secteur privé. Donc voilà ce que je veux. Je suis membre de ce comité directeur. Je suis content d'avoir suivi tout le processus pour avoir co-organisé les ateliers et les webinaires pour en arriver là. Je vous remercie beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wade. Christina?
Yes, thank you, Nicodemus. Hello again, everyone. So Christina Dashkiewicz here, and I am a project support officer, part of the IOM Migration, Environment and Climate Change Division. I myself have a background in international environmental law, and I'm currently supporting a project on the implementation of global policies on environmental migration and disaster displacement in West Africa. And I will be joining the network as an observer. So it's a position that will allow IOM to continue to support the network and also taking forward the research agenda. And IOM is very much looking forward to support the development of both, including the specific proposals that Manuel highlighted during the first hour. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christina, and also our interpreter for our sessions we have had so far as a steering group member. I want to also now welcome Dr. Tamara Good. Introduce yourself. He has also been our mentor for this research network, supporting us very much immensely to see Africa as a research agenda on climate issues and disasters related to mobility and displacement. Thank you very much, the good work you have done for Africa. And God bless you very much, whatever you'll be doing, Tamara. Tamara, introduce yourself formally.
Thank you so much, Nicodemus. I think I've spoken enough, but just to share that my research areas are primarily in refugee law with a focus on Africa's 1969 OAU Refugee Convention and also on the free movement of persons agreements and their application in the context of disasters and climate change. And really excited to get to know many of you more as part of the research network. So we have shared the link. Please click on it, please join, and we will be in touch about our first meeting, which will be in early 2022. So look forward to meeting everyone then. Thanks, Nicodemus.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tamara Good, and very, very supportive throughout the entire process, conceptualizing this idea of developing a research agenda for Africa. And is seen the research agenda is now born. And now finally today, we are launching the research network to take forward the research agenda. And with all the support we have had from UNHCR, IOM, from Masinde Muliro University of Science and Technology, from platform for disaster displacement, and from OBO and the African Union Commission from CAI. I really want to extend my very warm wishes, and I would like to see more working together to take forward that research agenda so that we find evidence-based solutions to the problem of averting. As Obo said, we need to find the risk of displacement, either coming from climate change or intersecting with disasters or conflict. The risk of displacement, that knowledge is missing in Africa. And the African researchers have a solution to that. And they cannot be solved by not working together, by working in silos, where this is the platform that will come bring together. It's a global challenge currently, and Africa is the epicenter of this displacement. And I really want to thank all of you for the various speakers from the first part and up to the second part. And I want to say that formally, we have launched the research network, Climate Mobility Africa Research Network, speaking from Masinde Muliro University of Science and Technology here in Kenya. Thank you and welcome to you all. Perhaps I want to tell once more, Tamara Good, if you have 1 or 2 words again for conclusion, you come on the floor, or Edwin Abuya.
Thank you, Nicodemus. I might jump in to request that those of you who would be happy to, it would be lovely to mark this occasion with our version of a virtual group photo. So if you're happy to turn on your camera, we'd love to see you. You've spent 2 hours listening to us, and so it would be great to see your faces.
How do you turn the camera on?
We have colleagues ready to take a screenshot for us, and we'll be very pleased to share it with you all. So thank you everyone for joining us to launch not only the research agenda, but also this research network. And congratulations to everyone, and thank you to everyone who has been part of that process. It's been a genuine pleasure to be involved in something that has generated so much interest and input and engagement by so many people from a really broad range of places. So congratulations to everyone, I think. And thank you. And we see you at the next one. So thank you, everyone. We say 1, 2, 3, cheese, and see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. See you. Bye-bye.
Merci.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good bye-bye.